Boom. We're back for another special episode of Hard Out. This time we're not doing a movie review. We're just generally bullshitting. This is actually a COVID roundtable where we've got Brett Saladino. If you've seen the show, you might have seen her on here a couple times. She's fucking awesome. But she's going to talk a bit about, she's the one in the SpaceX uniform up there. She's going to talk a bit about vaccines, as is my old buddy Julio Gagne. He just gave a thumbs up. He works in pharma, so he will definitely know what he's talking about in that regard.
That's a stripper pole in the background. He'll be demonstrating later his moves.
Yes. Festivus stripper pole. That is our sister, Sarah. Our sister, Sarah, is a nurse who's been jumping around from COVID hotspot to hotspot, from New York City, kind of around their peak, to Houston when they were getting an eruption. And you went to North Carolina most recently, right?
Yeah, South Carolina.
South Carolina. Yeah, all the same.
They just need to become one state, Carolina.
Right.
So last but not least,
keep them straight.
Old Air Force buddy of mine, Butch motherfucking Walker, who recently had. Do you still actively have COVID? Have you
tested negative? Finally, I can smell again. I can taste again, and stuff just tastes a lot better now. And I don't have to sleep as much. So
he could talk a bit about what it was like to have it, but also how it impacted his family. So, Julio, do you want to start us off by talking about this vaccine for a second? And well, all right, a lot of people out there seem to not even know what the fuck a vaccine does, because there's all this controversy. People don't want to take it or not, and they think it's like a magic cure for something. They don't. Do you want to just explain how a normative vaccine works, and then maybe how this RNA one? And Brett, you can chime in as well anytime you like on this.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, Bill Gates' microchips are not in it, as far as I know. So you're probably okay there. Now, the way vaccines typically work is there's a variety of different ways. You can take a virus and kind of fuck it up, and then give a fucked up virus to somebody that isn't going to be infective. You can look for different proteins on a virus and give somebody just the protein. And then what happens then is, before you've been exposed to that virus, you've now been exposed to a protein of the virus. So your immune system sees it and does, to make it simple, there's sort of two things. There's one where it sends antibodies, right, against those proteins. And antibodies are also think of it like jigsaw puzzles, right? They're little jigsaw puzzle pieces that fit. Like if this is the virus protein, you're going to have a little antibody that's going to fit just right. And if it's a neutralizing antibody, it's going to block it from being able to infect, okay? But in this case, it's just the protein. And all that's happening is your body is being given the information such that if it ever encounters the real virus, it now knows to make these little jigsaw puzzle pieces, right? So this is like the primer. Boom. Okay, now it goes away. The real virus comes in. Here's like what a real virus looks like. Okay. And then now your body sees it and it makes a little jigsaw puzzle piece, and bam, right? The antibodies come in and neutralize it so it can't infect further. So that's one part of the immune response. The other one that's also important, that gets a little more technical, is the T cell response. T cells are called T cell killers, or your killer cells. And they will actually come in and just kind of gobble up stuff. So they'll get activated as well. So basically, a vaccine is a preview of a virus that you may or may never get, but has now your immune system, your body's immune system, ready to act the minute it hits, such that hopefully it doesn't actually infect you, doesn't get into your cells and start dividing a lot. Your body can just take it out very quickly. So that's kind of vaccine 101. So it's not a cure, it's a prevention, right? If you already have the virus and you have active COVID, vaccine's going to do dick. It's not going to do anything. There are some therapeutic vaccines but that's a whole different discussion. And those work in different ways. They basically work in getting your immune system to activate now, and some oncology drugs work that way. But in terms of preventing you getting infected by a virus, that's how vaccines work. Do you want to add something, Brett, or talk about the RNA version of these vaccines?
Oh, I think that's a really good description. I think that, basically there's two different levels of immunity in our body. There's the innate immunity, which doesn't really involve T cells or B cells or antibodies. It's like the body's ability to make pus when you get a splinter. And so it doesn't see things as foreign that it makes antibodies to. And then the adaptive immunity does involve T cells, B cells, antibody response. So most vaccines are really designed to trigger that adaptive immune response and build up that level of immunity. And then your T cells remember it forever or for a long time. So if you get vaccinated and you don't get infected for 10 years, the hope is you'll still have some T cells that remember that and be able to ramp up the antibody response very quickly. So that's the nice thing about vaccines, is they generally last longer than the immunities from sometimes a real mild natural infection. So that's a good thing. I also wanted to talk just briefly about the different kinds of vaccines that are in development for COVID-19. There are, well, the two that have been approved so far, or I shouldn't say they're approved, they have an emergency use approval, but they're not formally approved yet. They are both mRNA vaccines. And what that means is that you're getting injected with the messenger RNA that codes for the viral spike protein. So it gets into your cells and your body starts to make that viral spike protein. And then that viral spike protein gets recognized as not self, and your immune system responds to it and makes antibodies to it.
And that viral spike protein, that's like the barbs or the stalks coming out of the coronavirus
that they use to attach and insert into our cells.
So your body, using that messenger RNA, creates its own version of those to trick your body into fighting it before it ever even encounters it.
Right. And the spike proteins don't have any other part of the virus associated with them. So there's no way it's going to make you sick. There's no coronavirus there. It's just the spike protein portion of it that your body's making.
You've seen in the news, there's been a couple mutations in Britain and South Africa, I think it was. How do you think the vaccine would affect, or be affected by the mutations? Is it still govern or still cover versions of the virus that mutate, or is it less likely to be successful?
I've heard that they're expecting that it's still going to work. It may not work quite as well, but the spike protein is a very highly conserved part of the virus. And so
it's more fundamental.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully it will still work. The mutations they've found so far are fairly small from what I'm reading. They're not enormous changes in the spike protein. They're small changes.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to my, my virtual little model here, right? If this is, let's say that my fist is the spike protein, and here's the little jigsaw puzzle piece that you're the antibody, right? If you get some mutations in the code that translate to some amino acid mutations in the protein, you'd have to have enough mutations that the spike protein would change so much that the jigsaw puzzle wouldn't fit. And in some ways, it's probably unlikely that spike proteins are going to mutate that much, because if their structure changes so much, then they won't work the way they're supposed to work for the virus either. And then those mutations would die out, so you wouldn't even have those. So these are probably just transient mutations, not a big deal. From what I've seen, it's about 1% of the spike protein coding that's been mutated so far. So it should work. But the other thing that I'm excited about these RNA vaccines versus the old style ones that they give you a little piece of protein, you can make a change very quickly to these vaccines. So the head of Pfizer has said that if they have a new RNA code based on the mutations, or even a variant of the virus, in 8 weeks they can just change the coding. Okay, so now we want this sequence of RNA, and they pop that in. I mean, to me, it's pretty exciting, and hopefully they'll develop this approach for flu vaccines and all kinds of stuff, because that's also why they were able to do it so quickly.
I was fortunate enough to invest in Moderna back in like February or something. And now the question becomes, how do I hang on to it, or do I sell when it reaches a point where they're like, they've sold as many vaccines as possible?
This is the shit people really want to know, by the way.
But right. But from one theory is to hang on to it, though, because that's, to your point, that this RNA technology isn't just going to be useful with the coronavirus. It's going to, be useful across the board. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I'm not that kind of a person to get into the stock market and this, that, and the other, but I would not get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely hold on for a while. I did actually already take out my original money, so it's all house money now. So whatever happens.
One thing I want to say is first I want to thank Butch for not making a fisting joke when Julio was doing that little example of the protest. Good form, dude.
Hey,
I had to fight it off myself.
Especially right now, except for the beer.
Secondly, any of you want to chime in and ask a question.
Yeah.
Sarah, if you want to ask them something or anything, because you most likely will be the first person. You've probably already been offered the vaccine, no?
Yeah, I should be getting it here shortly. Just don't know which hospital yet.
So that's a question for everyone. Is everyone here plan on getting it, or are they like Brett? We spoke before, and you were like, I don't know if I want to be an early adopter of this since it was fast tracked. And
but at the same time,
let Sarah be the guinea pig.
Oh,
I don't have any risk factors.
right, she's on the front line. So
and and so I'm so far down on the list that it would even be made available to me. You know, I would want people who were at higher risk to get it before me.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
believe
where,
in the vaccine, but
yeah, well, like we talked about, mRNA vaccines are, I know a lot of people are worried about how quickly it came out, but those are able to be made faster than most vaccines anyways. But for me, I don't know if you guys have any input on this. I'm not saying like screw the old people, but you know, we are giving it to frontline workers first, obviously, because we're kind of in the lion's mouth dealing with it. And then with our absurdity of PPE makes us more at risk. But as far as giving it to the most vulnerable populations, you know, say nursing home residents, you know, they're not walking around giving it to people. It's the people that are not being careful. It's the super spreaders. So my kind of thoughts were, like I said, not to screw the old people, but why are we, I would almost rather the general public get it because they're the ones
giving it to
everybody else, giving it to them. But then we get into, these are kind of some of the populations that think, you know, COVID is a hoax and maybe they're anti-vaxxers anyways, or wouldn't be trustful of the vaccine. So maybe they've already thought of that. And that's why we're kind of going down the hierarchy of the list of who we're giving it to when.
Spreaders. Yeah, by definition, the super spreaders are also the same people who refute the vaccine, et cetera. Yeah, that's a good point.
Let me ask you, Butch, before you got it, where were you with all this? Did you think coronavirus is no big deal, just the flu until it hit you and your family, or were you?
No, see, I had, so I had an idiot cousin that decided to, they went up to some big resort up in North Texas and had this giant wedding. And basically, I think 25 or 30 people ended up getting it from that. And my cousin, who was like, it's the Democratic flu, got it as well. Every member of his family got it. So
was this an outdoor wedding or was it indoors?
What's that?
Was it an indoor or outdoor wedding?
Well, they originally wanted to have it in Greece, so I'm sure it was indoor and all that crap. So whatever. But still, even after the fact, they were like, it's nothing. So I didn't even know about my aunt. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call and my sister comes and gets me and it's like, hey, Aunt Arlene's dead. What? I'm like, what's going on, you know? So come to find out, she had been around a couple of kids the weekend prior. This is how fast it hit her. So I'm guessing maybe she might have hit some other time, been around somebody, but those kids' parents had tested positive. So long story short, she dropped them off on November 15th, that Sunday. She was dead on the 22nd. They told her Friday, the 20th, that you need to go to the hospital. And she said, if I'm not better by Sunday, I'll go. Well, she's better. She ain't here no more. So
wow.
My Uncle Pat went back into the house after it was sanitized. And he ended up with it. And it was 7 to 10 days after they had already been doing their thing. And so I thought about it. I talked to my wife, who is a COVID nurse, and she says, you just keep your distance. And I did everything because I had to take care of my grandmother. She's 88.
Right.
And I did all that. Well, lo and behold, my grandmother was there the day before. So we all got it from that house. And My Uncle Pat is not on a ventilator. He's still in ICU. That was my aunt's husband. They just keep him sedated. He's got like a permanent little CPAP until he can breathe again. He had emphysema. My grandmother was 88, and she was nearly out of it. She hadn't gone to the hospital. She'd be gone. But thankfully, they gave them both plasma, which now I'm going to go out and anybody who's had COVID, I want them to know, look, go donate plasma, man. That's what saved my family. So I'm serious about it. Go do it. I'm going to donate as much as I can, as often as I can, because if I can save somebody else's family like it saved mine, right on. So,
Oh yeah,
beautiful, man. Sorry for your loss. First off, I'm sure all of us echo
it's
that.
devastating.
That's wicked.
Did your aunt have pre-existing conditions? She was up in age, or
she had a heart condition, and like I said, they told her that she had pneumonia. And if nobody knows what COVID pneumonia is, which Sarah, I know you do, man, it doesn't go away. Your body just keeps producing fluid because your lungs are trying to be like, oh, I can exhale this, and we'll cough
like
it
gives
out.
you cystic fibrosis or something almost.
And you drown yourself. And I don't know if maybe she threw a blood clot, because Sarah, you may attest to this. Natalie tells me that now people who have overcome it, and even the older ones,
Correct.
Now you got to worry about blood clots. You could have a heart attack. You could have a stroke.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, ever since she's been home, has taken 2 aspirins every morning at about 5 o'clock. She gets real heavy in her chest. So she's going to the doctor Monday, and I said, you need to lay everything out what you've been doing, because she needs to be watched. And so I'm staying there, and I came up here to do this, and
Yeah, because part of it, that's the thing out there too with all these arguments, and it's been so politicized between the left and the right somehow, which fucking everything is. But is how many deaths there have been, and the death rate and the percentage of people dying, and compare that to the flu, etc. But it's like with a war, they tally casualties, not just the dead. And the casualties, like look at D-Day, there weren't that many dead relative to casualties. When you hear about the high numbers, that's the casualties. That's maimed and shell-shocked, and this shit can change the rest of your life, right? And then even just the psychological
of the world too, Blythe, who sat in the corner and was deaf and dumb all of a sudden, I'm sorry, Band of Brothers is one of my faves. So.
Oh yeah. I was like,
but yeah,
reference did I miss? But well, and I was
these
just
people who think they can just ride it out before and not have consequences for a much longer period,
or that it's only about those with pre-existing conditions or fat asses who didn't take care of themselves before, etc. It's like you can there's a pitcher on the Red Sox, what's his name, Eduardo Rodriguez, I think, right? He got myocarditis. He had to sit out the whole season because he had heart inflammation, essentially, right?
Yeah.
From COVID. And this is a peak physical athlete, so
well, it's like, I'd rather have the vaccine than have lifelong lasting conditions from this. I could make a 5-hour podcast on how it happens and all the things I've seen, but it's just,
well, that's what concerns me. Like, I have extracurricular activities from time to time, and I have friends that that do. My neighbor ended up with it.
Cheers.
He didn't get it from me. And so this vaccine, is it going to be like smallpox? Like, you're going to get it once and boom, you're done, and we're going to do it yearly? Is it going to be something that changes?
Yeah, I mean, it's too soon to know. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to be an annual shot, like once a year.
Well, I mean, that's what makes sense. But I mean, so my grandmother being 88, when she gets the opportunity to take it, should she get it, or should she say, hey, I've already got the antibodies? And
No, everybody who's had it already should also get it, because the immune response you get from having it is likely not as strong as the immune response you'll get from getting the vaccine. So you should get it regardless.
Same thing as the flu shot. You get the flu shot annually.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it'll be the same thing, where it mutates sometimes, and we come out with a different flu vaccine strain every year, based on
you got the trio, you got A, B, and C, and then
Well, that's something I wanted to ask Brett
on that the other day, Jay. So
what's that?
Same kind of deal, having the different strains, and
yeah, we were talking about that. That's something I wanted to ask Julio and Brett, is what I kind of gathered from what you were saying earlier. So every year, like Sarah was saying, we got to get a flu shot. but there's always mutations, and sometimes you can get the flu shot and still get the flu because it's a different flu than you got vaccinated for. But are you saying with the RNA that it might be almost more of a sweeping coronavirus vaccine than something that's individual, and that it can handle mutations even because it's about the protein, not that more specific part of the
Well, he said something earlier about how much it morphs, right?
Right.
Julio?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, we could get, pretty different variants later on, but what I was saying is once they identify it, they can make the RNA match that one very quickly. So in
Right.
8 weeks, you could have the new one like that, right?
Right.
And then hopefully you wouldn't have to do a big phase 3 study again, because you've kind of proven it already, and all you're changing is a little bit the nucleotides of the RNA, and that's it. So hopefully you can just put it out there. Because that's what we do with the flu vaccines. We just give different antigens every year based on what we think is coming. And if we guess wrong, like last year I got the flu because it didn't work, the shot that I got. But
Right. Because of the way the flu vaccine is made, you have to kind of guess what the flu is going to do that year, guess what mutations are going to happen, and design your vaccine a year in advance so that it can be up and produced and ready to start injecting people. And if you miss, some years they miss, then the vaccine isn't very good.
But 8 weeks versus a year.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
an mRNA
Massive.
vaccine, they can adjust as the virus is changing, and within a matter of months have a good targeted vaccine for those mutations instead of just guessing.
I got a quick question, and surely somebody knows this. They make such a big deal about all these COVID vaccines have to be kept so cold. How many other vaccines have to be kept at the same temperature? I mean, is it?
All
does
I
the
saw
flu
was
virus
the
have to be-
same as the Pfizer, I think. Or
Yeah,
was
the-
it? No, the
Yeah,
Moderna.
but he's saying vaccines we've had for years. Are there any others that need to be kept that cold? Right? Is this
Not that cold.
commonplace?
I'm not
So-
aware of any.
No.
There's a
The-
lot that require refrigeration, but not
Yeah.
that cold.
Right. Well, I
No,
think
the
there's
problem-
a difference between the Pfizer and the Moderna one. I was
Yep.
reading that the
Yep.
Pfizer
Pfizer
one
has to be
required
kept
way
colder.
lower. Yeah, and Moderna's is more already commonly used
Yep.
for other.
Yeah.
I was
So it's
trying to
Well-
figure out
going
what the
in?
reason for that
I don't-
was. I was trying to research it, and I know that the Pfizer one is in a lipid nanoparticle. That's how it's dispersed in the vaccine, is in a lipid nanoparticle. And it's possible, I couldn't find this definitively, but there are other particles that they can use that are biopolymers that are more stable. And it may have something to do with that, but I can't be sure yet because I
That would make
couldn't
sense.
find it.
I mean, the problem itself is the RNA molecule falls apart easily. Like one of the
Yes.
early projects I had when I was in the labs, I had to isolate RNA from a hepatitis C virus. And man, if you just you have to be super careful because you have RNA enzymes that break it down on your fingers, and you can just take it apart, right? DNA, when you go looking for crime scenes and all that, DNA is very stable. You can do PCR and DNA from mummies, but RNA just falls apart.
Yeah.
So you have a vaccine that's made from that. So they, like Brett was saying, they coat it with these lipids. They do all kinds of stuff to keep it safe until it's inside your body. And honestly, though, there's no reason why the Pfizer vaccine can't be tweaked so that it can be stored at still very cold like Moderna, but not as crazy cold as now. They probably just wanted to rush whatever version they had through, and they said, "Fuck it, we can store it super cold for now, and then later we can figure out how to make it so it's not so cold." But
Yeah, they
but
just-
RNA,
They're ready to make some more money. I don't know
Oh,
how
yeah.
much money they made off Viagra, but I'm sure they're making.
Lots, I'm sure.
yeah, Pfizer does all right.
You
Let me
can
ask
trust
you
us.
something.
If you can trust us with your penis, you can trust
Right.
us with the
Right.
vaccine, right? Yeah.
That should be the tagline right there.
Right.
Mhm.
Trust us, man. Good.
Hey, here's a question about these. All right. It's all right. First of all, to say it's funny how fear is used on all sides. Fear, like the people who are anti-vax will argue that they're using fear to get you to take their vaccine with their microchips and their whatever in it. But obviously they have a fear as well. That's why they won't take it, because they're scared. They'll say it's because they're too smart or whatever, but
Mhm.
it's usually fear
It's
driven.
all fear driven
But,
still, yeah.
Some of the things that are being used on the anti-vaxxer side are these anaphylactic reactions to the vaccines, which I was reading something specific that gave me pause. And man, I wrote it down on a piece of fucking paper, which was my mistake going analog. I can't find the piece of paper, but I was reading, maybe one of you guys know this off the top of your head, that there's a specific thing in these vaccines that are in some other drugs that give anaphylactic reactions, and it was a
Polyethylene
phosphate
glycol.
what is it?
Polyethylene glycol.
Yes, thank you.
PEG. Yeah.
Now,
Polyethylene
I want to ask you a
Dr.
personal
Pepper.
question. I had colon cancer, stage 3. I had oxaliplatin, or your Folfox 5. You probably know very well, right, Julio? And I had that anaphylactic reaction to oxaliplatin that a lot of people have. Chris was there for it. It was fucking
One of the
crazy.
most terrifying moments of my life.
Yeah,
is
team of
watching
nurses had to
them-
come
yeah,
in,
like
fucking
5 nurses on him.
Yeah, it was crazy. So, should I fear that getting the vaccine, I could have that similar reaction? So maybe I shouldn't have the vaccine if I've had that before.
No, you should have the vaccine, but they should monitor you
Like I should,
for.
yeah.
That you should it's like when I went to get my my shingles vaccine the other day, I got it and I just left, right? No big deal, because I had the first shot already a couple months. So, but for you, if you've had anaphylactic reactions, you should still get it, but you should be held there for, I think it's like 30 minutes, 45 minutes while they watch you, right? And then once you're past kind of the period where you would have had the anaphylactic reaction, then you're good to go.
Well, the weird thing, like with the oxaliplatin, though, it took my 5th treatment. It was like either weekly or every other week type thing. And it was, I guess, building up, though, residual. And they said that.
Yeah.
Like, people
Yeah,
have
it's
problems with
normal.
this. So is that something, though, with the vaccine where it could take a while and I go back for my booster and then hours after the booster have a reaction? So should I maybe hang out at the hospital parking lot on my own longer than half an hour,
I'll let Sarah, the nurse, address this one.
Right.
I mean, with any vaccine, we always tell people to, especially if it's clinic-based, sit down and wait in the waiting area for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's just a general rule of any type of vaccine you get. But I'm sure you guys know with allergic reactions and immunology kind of thing, it's kind of like, say, just the same thing with like allergies to foods or cats. The more you're exposed to it, sometimes it takes a certain number of exposure for your body to react to it. So I wouldn't say that you would have a reaction like hours later, but with the instances of you getting that one medication and it took maybe the 5th time, maybe you might have a reaction on the 2nd dose of the COVID vaccine. But I wouldn't say you need to stay overnight to make sure you don't have
I'm
a reaction. I think I know, but
People
I think
hate
it
hospitals.
would.
I was in the hospital for like a week. It was the shit. I'm like, this is the place to be if anything goes wrong.
Something happens, boom.
I have panic attacks because I'm in my basement thinking I'm having a heart attack. I'm at the hospital. I'm cold, dude. I'm there.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say it wouldn't. The amount of time wouldn't be as big of an issue as maybe just the maybe the 2nd dose that you got it. If you had like a mild reaction after the initial vaccine and then went back 21 days later for your 2nd dose, that you would probably be more likely to have one.
Last paranoid, selfish question on this front. Is it safe to say that if you are at a hospital when you have anaphylactic shock, you pretty much be saved every time? It's just a matter of getting to you quick enough? Or can you have a reaction that's so bad, like your throat closes up, they can't do shit?
They would do something called, they would crike you. So they would basically do like an emergency, trach, and instead of putting a tube down your throat, they would just.
Because that's usually the issue, is breathing, right? When people have shock, anaphylactic shock, they can't breathe.
And is that the EpiPen for these situations? Is that the same, first measure? If, someone has this reaction, you inject something to counter it basically first. Is that the first move before you go to the trach level,
Yeah, like they shot me up with all those steroids and shit.
Well, it would be all simultaneous. If you're in a hospital, they'd be giving you, steroids, Benadryl, the whole concoction of.
Brings me to Trump for a second and how he got treated for it, and how, remember, I feel like I've felt better than I've felt in years the next day. That's how I felt. Almost died, but got pumped full of fucking Barry Bonds steroids and felt like the shit for like a day and a half. And then
enema. I don't know what was
hands on those,
but they gave it to him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm saying to all the Trump supporters out there, we want to get this podcast out as far and wide. And honestly, that's kind of who I'm most interested in talking to, is the people who think it's a hoax and this and that. And we got like Butch here can attest to it, and obviously all of you. But the people should just know that when Trump, his reaction to it, first off, he got the best doctors in the fucking world immediately working on him with the best experimental shit that you're never going to get, etc. So don't say this 76-year-old dude who eats Big Macs all day laughed it off. I can too, right? Plus, who knows? It might kill him in a year or some shit.
Right. He might get a blood clot.
Right.
Right.
I'm curious to hear what Sarah has to say about being like in the thick of it, in
Yeah.
the shit, so to speak.
Yeah, let's scare some
if you
people
wanna get
too
into-
into how, for a lot of them, it probably started as nothing, and then one day they just bottomed out, right?
You know, when I first started working in New York, there was no rhyme or reason to who died. You know, sometimes I would have I think my youngest was 19. I would have a 19 or 26-year-old that had no pre-existing conditions and was on ECMO, which is like a heart lung bypass. They were on dialysis or CRT, you know, which acts as your kidneys, and were on maxed out on ventilator settings. And, you know, they would be having so much clotting issues that we would have limbs rotting and falling off. And then I would have 96-year-old grandma that has 99 problems under the sun, but she would be on room air with no
But a bitch
oxygen,
ain't
but
one. That's
just
right.
happened to have COVID. So I quit trying to figure it out a long time ago when I was up there about
the rhyme or reason.
why it hits who. But I will say, you know, it was very demographically apparent about, you know, race and ethnicity.
Well, let's
who it
talk
was
about
hitting.
vitamin D,
Yeah,
because vitamin D seems to be pretty crucial. Is this right
It
or wrong?
is.
You scientists
Yeah,
can
this will
help on
be-
that too.
we have a cocktail that we've kind of found out that works now. We're doing, you know, like a gram or two of vitamin C. We're doing 5,000 IUs of vitamin D. We're doing melatonin to help with like the cytokine storms and the inflammation cascade. And then, of course, a lot of anticoagulant things that we now figured out. Because at first, you know, we were like, oh, this is it's transmitted respiratory wise, but you have this these things in the bottom of your lungs called, you know, ACE2 receptors. And I'm sure you guys can speak to this as well. You know, your ACE2 also lines the inside of your every single blood vessel that you have in your body. So that's where the virus, you know, enters through the lungs and then goes down to the kidneys, and then it begins to affect every single organ in your
And
body.
then it's endothelial, right?
Right.
Like the endothelium gets
Yeah.
infected
Right.
with this shit, and who knows what could go
Right.
wrong.
And then it just has this huge, you know, inflammation and clotting cascade issue where every organ just begins to fail. And, you know, I'm probably not going in order here, but the COVID pneumonia is like nothing I have ever seen. You know, I'm no stranger to death. I've been by trade, I'm a neuro and trauma ICU nurse at 5 years. And these are the sickest people that I have ever seen in my entire career.
How's it psychologically being around that? Like, you're wearing masks and everything, but the PPE issue you talked about, are you experiencing any PTSD, talking to anyone for it?
I mean, I am. I've you know, on top of our own personal demons and personal issues, a lot of medication, a lot of therapy. You know, I'm doing like 3 different types of therapy for things that happened before COVID, and then, you know, COVID on top of it. It's not just me, healthcare workers. It's affecting everyone's mental health. You know, those staying home, people losing family members. You know, people's livelihood being turned upside down. But you know, it was kind of just at first, it was just so shocking that I didn't really think about it. And then, you know, the more I started to do, this is why I'm taking a break now, because I just honestly need a break from, and there's only so many bags you can zip. And you just start becoming a machine. And I started getting into the headspace of like, why the fuck does any of this matter?
Yeah.
And, you know, especially coming
kinda
home to
nihilistic.
Texas in between my assignments, sometimes, you know, nobody's wearing masks and I'm just like isolating myself in my apartment. And it's just,
It's like a Soderbergh movie.
you know, and then
For
sometimes,
real.
you know, I try and go to sleep and I wouldn't know if these are flashbacks, but, you know, every person that I've seen die just like flashes through my head. And, you know, there's only so much of it. You know, some of my ICU units were maybe like an 18-bed ICU. We were having 6 people die a day.
Holy cow.
I was doing CPR on 6 people a day for 8 weeks.
It's insane.
God.
And sometimes
We
it was
salute you, like Brett,
Yes.
prior service. Butch served with me in the military.
Yeah.
This is true
But-
hero shit. You're like on the front lines. It's
Well,
crazy.
I think the real people, the real heroes are, those staying home,
Yeah,
but,
staying home, wear a fucking
Mm.
mask when you go. That's the thing
Yeah.
too. This is an opportunity to be a hero, you dicks.
And all you have to do is put a piece of cloth
Instead, you
on your
choose to
face.
be
That's
the
all
villain.
it takes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, we're doing this all in full PPE, and
Right.
I mean, I've never been so exhausted in my entire life, but
But
it's
having to
just,
reuse masks and shit, how's the PPE issue? Has it gotten better? Because I know back in the early days, you guys were wearing garbage bags and shit, right?
yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
it kind of honestly depended on the area I was in. South Carolina, I mean, every single hotspot that I went to was worse than the other for different reasons, but I feel like New York honestly had its shit together the most out of all the places that I went to, even though it was
Early.
early,
Mhm.
but I think it's probably because of how Governor Cuomo handled everything too.
I
But
was just
very,
same thing. That's crazy. And
Yeah.
and I'm sorry to interrupt, Sarah, but these idiots I heard, oh man, did you see that video? These guys is walking around and they're filming all these emergency rooms and stuff like that, and they're all empty. There's not a bunch of COVID people in there. And I
well, and
think
sometimes that is the case. It just depends on the area that you're in. Just because it's, not the case in your area doesn't mean it's not shit somewhere else.
Right. And just
Well,
because that
that's-
room is empty doesn't mean there's not a body bag in the basement that was just in the
That's what
room
I'm
not
saying.
too long ago.
Yeah.
I still think it's
Um,
all BS. And my cousin, he's going through the same stuff, except he's not taking care of my grandmother. He's not going to take care of my uncle whenever he comes home. I'm going to, but he still think it's all fake as shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever. Oh man, here, come here. I'll make out with you. I was like, man, you're an idiot.
It's just a way to
First,
shirk
Not cute enough.
responsibility.
And second off,
Mhm.
I just, it'll kill you. It almost,
Yeah, it's like err on the side of caution,
Yeah,
If you
man.
don't have any evidence one way or the other, let's err on the side of protecting our lives.
And a lot of it, once people, you've had COVID for 3 weeks and you're testing negative, a lot of times those are the people that ended up getting intubated, like because their lungs are so scarred, or they just, have these massive blood clots, or that are just, stroking out. I had a lot of neurological insults and deficits, people just having brain bleeds and stroking out that way, or
Yep.
just pulmonary embolisms, or anywhere else, people coughing up like lung castings, and it was disgusting.
Well, like my good
So-
friend Perry died in January here in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
And very mysteriously just had a stroke. Guy in great health, right?
Yeah.
Very full of life, just had a stroke, deteriorated. They said he had a fever that spiked when he was in the hospital. He was on a ventilator and eventually
Well,
died. And
That's normal. With
now we're seeing
like
though,
if they had
Well-
if they have a stroke, sometimes there's, this thing called
Yeah, yeah.
central fever, but
yeah, I'm
that-
sure as your body's fighting off
Yeah.
death and everything that, it goes.
But-
My only point being though, that now we're seeing these reports that even in Wisconsin, the virus was here in December and January because they're looking at older blood samples, I guess, that still had antibodies or some shit in it
Oh.
from way back
Okay.
then. So
Yep.
this thing
Yep.
was here way earlier than anyone thinks.
Right.
Could have been. So the death numbers are probably low. Everyone talks about them being overinflated.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's probably
Yeah,
more
they only
of this
started
that you
from,
didn't
I think,
realize was COVID.
February or something
Right.
like that, where they
Yeah.
went back and okay, yeah, we're going to go to February. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got sick in December, of 19, and I'm telling you, I didn't get out of that bed for 7 days. Like I literally laid in bed, I couldn't do anything, and I missed work for 2 full weeks.
Crazy.
So, I
Well,
think-
then that would mean you had it twice, right? Do you guys want to speak to that at all about getting repeat? First there's long haulers, but then there's people who have tested positive more than once in between rounds of testing negative.
Yeah, so I think the majority of the ones that you see, I do believe that you can get it twice, right? And typically that's because the first time you get it, you have such a low immune response to it. So it's like you never really got vaccinated for it, right? And again, that's why it's important that even if you've been positive, you get the vaccine. So I think the majority of the cases, though, that we've seen of these reinfections, many of those could be simply that the virus level went maybe below detection, was still there, came back up. We see with HIV for one, right? So it could be that kind of thing. But there's definitely legitimate cases of people getting infected twice. And again, I think, Brett can speak to it as well. I think it's related to the fact that their first immune response wasn't strong enough, and then they get infected again.
Yeah, I saw a report of I think it was 2 people in Japan that they proved that the strains that they got were different strains. There's
Yeah, that's what I was
multiple
gonna say
strains of
too,
this
right.
out there. There's the strain that the Chinese or Asian strain, there's the European strain. Now there's this new one
Yep.
that we're seeing in multiple countries that has a higher infectivity rate.
With kids too, like in the UK,
Right,
much
it's
more kids are getting it.
hitting younger people more often.
Ugh.
And it's, I mean, it's already spread. They've already reported it in like 6 different countries, but it's now the dominant strain in London
Mhm.
because it's spreading so much faster. It's pushing out the virus strains that don't spread as fast.
It's so
So,
crazy
yeah,
that Britain voted to leave the EU, and now the EU's like, don't let Brits into
Yeah.
fucking mainland Europe.
Right.
Like,
But then they're doing really weird things, like France said, okay, we're going to cut all flights from London to France. We're not letting anyone in unless they're French nationals. So
That kind of
apparently
shit.
if you're a French national, you're not going to get infected. You can just come home because
This whole
you're
thing
immune
speaks
or
to
something. I mean,
Julio,
it's
you're not-
crazy.
all right, we know your alter ego, right?
Carlos Sagan, baby.
Carlos Sagan, right?
Yeah.
Let's use this as an opportunity too. Chris turned me on years ago when I was a teenager to Carl Sagan's A Demon Haunt or
Oh yeah.
Demon
Demon
Haunted
Haunted
World,
World,
Candle.
yeah.
Science is a candle in the dark, right?
Yeah.
Formative, life-changing shit. Can we use this as an opportunity for the 7 people who will see it? Hopefully, again, we can get this thing out there a little more to just evangelize science for a minute. Because if everybody thought scientifically, we wouldn't have to myth bust so much and fight these conspiracy theories and all this shit. And we wouldn't be nearly in the bad place we are now. People would have worn masks. They would have socially distanced. That, you know, evangelize.
Yeah. So this one really hits close to home because I've always said that if we could get people to understand just basic stuff in science, a lot of things would go easier. And honestly, as bad as COVID is and has been, and you know, we're gonna get beyond it. To me, it's a test case for the fact that we're not gonna do anything about global warming, which is gonna be like the end of humans, period, right?
Eventually.
So if
yeah.
we can't get this one, which is from it's relatively straightforward to take out, you know, a virus via vaccines and all this stuff, right? Global warming is incredibly complicated, and you literally need every nation on the earth working together to fix that.
And
And
you
if
don't
we
have the
can't-
same special interests
Right.
protecting the
Right.
status quo, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, yeah. So the first step is if we could get science, you know, to be understood better, just basic stuff, not politicized, because there's no reason for it to be political, quite
That's
honestly.
the craziest thing. Science should be
Yeah.
Right.
It's
politics proof, but
it's like-
somehow,
Right.
Math?
Right.
Can math be politicized too?
right?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
So I don't know. It's
Now there's
depressing.
junk science, you know,
Yes.
which
For
some people would
sure.
argue there's junk
For sure.
math, but
Yeah.
The
Well, and I think
scientific
that's-
method.
Or what?
Specifically.
That's critical too, as part of teaching people science is teaching them to be curious, teaching them how to investigate when they read something that doesn't make sense, teaching them how to be skeptical about junk science. Because if you don't understand those things right now, it's actually easier to find junk science than real science on the internet. And that's one of the reasons the anti-vaxxers are growing so fast, is because when you click in how do vaccines work, you get 600 hits that say vaccines are evil and 1 or 2 that say, yeah, vaccines work. Because it just, the junk science is out there and it's geared for people, I hate to say this, people who tend to have a lower intelligence, they aren't as well read, they don't have
Less
the
educated.
background knowledge
they're from Texas.
science. I mean, I've been studying science since I was in 4th grade.
Yeah.
I am a veterinary pathologist. I went to college for 8 years. I did a 3-year residency. I've been working in the drug development industry now for 20 years. And when I hear someone say to me, oh, you know, we have a cure for cancer already, they're just hiding it because they make money off the treatments, I want to throttle them.
Yeah, I agree with you.
don't understand that mindset.
She's
Well,
coming for you, Chris
because-
Rock.
There are hundreds of thousands of different types of cancer and different cells in your body that are caused by different mutations and different toxins. There is not a cure for cancer. When I ask someone, oh, you know, they say my grandma died of cancer. What kind did she have? Lung cancer. And
Yeah,
I say,
right.
what kind of lung cancer? And they can't
Mhm.
answer me.
Mhm.
T-cell lymphoma. That's what killed my mother. It was bad shit.
Well, I mean,
Lymphomas
the other
can be
piece,
very bad, but there's about 40 different kinds of lymphoma, and some of
Yeah,
them are not so
that's
bad.
T-cell.
but the easy answer is if we had the cure for cancer, we would put it out there because it would make billions and billions of dollars,
Right.
not just for curing
Nobel
people.
Peace
It-
Prize.
Just think of the
It'd be-
stock price of it.
yeah,
Christ.
yeah, yeah.
Hey,
And-
can
But
I
I-
go? I'm going to sell my Moderna, and I'm going to go ahead and buy into that. No, hold on.
Yeah.
Well,
But I mean, I think my industry has a little bit of blame here too,
Mhm,
because I mean, part of the reason that people are anti-vaxxers is because they don't trust my industry. And yeah, we do a lot of good, but we've also done some real shitty stuff over the years to the point where, I mean, up until maybe this COVID time, we're the lowest trusted industry. We're like below oil, we're below lawyers,
Yeah.
we're below bankers, we're at the bottom, right? And if you look at it, it's kind of fucked up because we're actively creating stuff that hopefully helps people's lives and all that. But because of other stuff that we've done, that's
yeah,
been
but
terrible.
it's the corporate side of it that's doing that.
Yeah.
It's not the scientific side that's doing that.
Yeah.
Don't not trust the science because
Right.
you had some madmen sell you some bullshit, and you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's
Right.
been the scientists too to some extent. I mean, we've done some shitty stuff in the past, right? I mean, so I get part of the why we're not trusted when we say just trust us, it's going to work. The
Right.
vaccine's safe, right? So it's tough.
It is tough. That's true. And hey, thanks for copping to that as far as your industry goes. Not that you
Mhm.
represent it, but I see you again more as that Carlos Sagan type who is trying to preach the scientific method. But
Yeah.
again, to what Brett was saying, if people were more scientifically literate, they could read some of the studies themselves and know
Yeah.
if it's bullshit or not, you know?
Yeah.
My and she's constantly posting links to junk science that are articles she found on PubMed. And she's like, but it must be true. It's on PubMed. I said, you don't understand. PubMed is a database of all publications. It doesn't mean they're good publications. You can find anything on PubMed. You have to read it, and then you have to read the sources that it's referencing, and you have to look at who are the authors. Are they people that are knowledgeable in this field,
Mhm.
or do they work in some other completely different field? And she's like, well, no, PubMed is run by the NIH, therefore everything is government approved and it must be true. I'm like,
But you can't
"No,
trust them.
No,
Yeah,
it's
many of
not."
these same people don't trust the government. So what?
Yeah, it's crazy. And, I think if you walk down the street and if you just stopped people and said, where is your thyroid gland? Point to your thyroid gland. Nobody could do it
Yeah.
because we just don't know. We
Isn't
don't
that next
know.
to your funny bone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, if you played
Or
Operation,
here, right?
you knew.
Saying.
Yeah, see, Operation, man. Got to get
There
these
you
kids off
go.
that Fortnite.
There you go.
It's right next to my
Speaking of-
wishbone.
I have no idea how much time we have left, but let's speak a bit, I guess, to this conspiracy shit a little bit more, because it infects more than just how we look at vaccines. I mean, you got QAnon politics. There's fucking people getting elected to public office who are QAnoners, Again, I guess it's just general science evangelizing, but the fact that how do we get grown adults, first off, of course, get the Betsy DeVosses out of there, change public education to where we're teaching young kids the scientific method, critical thinking, etc. But how do we reach these adults that are so wired by this point?
You don't.
Can you?
Can't.
Yep.
I don't think you can. I really don't. I mean, I think you could
Can we
find
mind
some.
control them with a Bill Gates virus or a vaccine?
Well, that's what we're
To
going
some
to do.
You
To
could
some
find
degree, what
some
we're doing
people-
right now is the
Right.
best you can do, is to evangelize and have conversations about it and try and slowly win people over, even
And
if it
some
takes
people will
generations.
be really receptive to it, and they'll listen and they'll go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I think,
Mhm.
everyone has their own doily of beliefs. It's all woven as your child. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's easy to fit things into the beliefs you already have. But if somebody gives you a new thing that doesn't fit in there, you go, oh, that can't be true because it doesn't fit with my doily. So what we have to do is we have to unravel these doilies, and we have to go piece by piece by piece why what they believe isn't true or isn't correct, and then try and give them more facts, more information, more knowledge slowly. So it's not overwhelming. So they don't panic and go, oh my God, my life is in danger because you're scaring me with all this new information.
Like Butch said, we
It's
can't.
really hard.
It's like to take
Right.
years to deprogram each person.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, we're fucked.
It's
But I
really
mean,
hard.
you got your QAnons, right? But then when I was living in California, we had measles outbreaks in Marin County
Mhm.
because, well-educated, people making lots of money weren't vaccinating their damn kids. And these are people that should know better. These were people that,
Jenny McCarthy's of the world.
Yeah.
yeah. But it wasn't about not being educated. It was about, I don't know what.
And look, we're not talking
Yeah.
shit about those people. It always comes from a place of wanting to protect their children.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
And
not like
Absolutely.
malicious. Yeah.
that's what the fear is. The fear is like fear that something bad's going to happen to your kid. So you don't want to
Yeah.
be the one, especially to give them the poison and shit, But
And
it's just,
I
that's
think
not
it's
what's
always
happening.
Dumb. If you think about it, when it comes to it, I was in the military. I remember standing in that line, and I remember thinking, man, they're using the same needle for all these shots,
Ooh.
and it's not. So I mean, hey, they may have put a chip in there. Hey, if I get this vaccine, they want to put a chip in me. You know what? I don't give a shit. You know why? Because I'm not that important. And these
Right. What are they going to do? Track your
Dude,
trips
God
to
bless you, Butch, dude.
Starbucks or whatever.
These people think they're so important. They got to come up.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Right.
not getting that vaccine, man. They're going to put that chip in me.
Uh-huh.
It's like, are you flying to Colombia and bringing back a bunch of coke or what? I mean,
Right.
what-
We got to
They
hide.
track us with these.
Right. You
Exactly.
carry your own
Brought that
chip
up before, too.
everywhere, dude.
Yeah.
Hey, you're worried about that, but you're going to take your fucking phone, you idiot.
Yes. That's true
Yeah.
too, though. And Brett, this is something we spent half of our other talks talking about is ego. And that's what
Yeah.
he's speaking to is the fact that everyone thinks that Bill Gates, this billionaire, has some insidious plot with some fucking overlord reptilians. Who fucking knows how deep their shit goes? But point being
Motherfucker's
that
up buying
anyone
$500,000
would wanna,
watches and driving a Bugatti. He don't give a
Yeah.
fuck about what you're doing.
and you want to mind control tire salesmen and Dubuque
Right.
and shit. Like, to what end? Like, dude,
That is almost complete.
get
Yeah.
over
As
yourself.
if he wouldn't do something with the fucking PCs you buy, you idiots.
Here, get the
Right.
vaccine, but eat some mushrooms because that'll.
Hey, San
Make you-
Pedro skin, man. I got some. I'm
Oh,
peeling
shit.
the waxy part off. I'm gonna peel it later and make
My man.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Fuck
after.
chips. Let's put psilocybin in the vaccine. So everyone gets that
no
too.
mescaline, psilocybin. Hey, that'll be fine. I can get some
Yes.
spores. Hey, Julio, can you hook me up? I'll get you some spores.
I can.
Get them
Yeah.
on that vaccine list early. dude.
Brad,
That's for-
you got anything you can add? You got 8 years. Science.
Oh man.
Put our heads
Yeah.
together, goddammit. Let's make this shit
So,
work.
do you have more, Butch, to say about the actual experience of suffering through it yourself? Like what it was like? I mean,
You had a pretty
losing
light
taste.
taste, right?
Jay and I lived to
Okay.
taste things, so
I-
that's like the
I'll-
worst
let me-
tragedy.
One thing I didn't touch on a minute ago is so I've got next door neighbors, across the street neighbors, and
In the
basically,
Shire.
like every day we go over there and like we're drinking beer and we're hanging.
Frodo and
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, hey, the hairy feet, I don't mind. I rub them.
We're not talking
You
about
like
you
it,
tasting
admit it.
women.
Hey, I like them short. Hey, if I turn my head just right, I can.
Just the right height.
All right, you were saying though. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So when it happened, so I'd been over there with my uncle. I did everything I was supposed to. I kept my distance. I wore a mask. I washed my hands constantly. I totally Howard Sterned it. Like I was washing and like I did it. Like
Probably.
I was
Yes,
good.
we got our Howard reference in.
And
Awesome.
man, I shot an 8-point buck on December 8th, and I went and picked it up. I put it in the bag, and
The buck
I
out.
was sweating uncontrollably. Just it was cold
Yeah.
outside, and I'm pale and white. So that was the start of it. I lost my smell, and I was like, shit, I've got it before I got my positive test. The hardest part to me was every person that you've been around the last 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Now you gotta.
Hey, I just
yeah,
want to let you
notify.
know.
It's like the AIDS
I'm
call,
around
but with
people
people
that
you
got
just
it.
were in a room with and shit.
Right.
It's crazy.
You know, and
It's
then
Wilt Chamberlain
get the
making the
positive
call.
test, and you go, yeah, I got to call 10,000 women and tell them that I've got COVID. You know,
All right,
Just like
Will
you did when you
Chamberlain's
got the
here.
clap.
Exactly.
Awesome German. I know.
Hey,
Same
I
list.
got a Q-tip stuck in there, and I just want you to know about it and all. But no, for real, having to call some of those people, like I've got some friends, old hippie friends, like in their 70s, and calling them and having to say, hey, look, man, I just tested
Go get
positive.
tested.
I was around you 4 days ago. I'm sorry. You know, and then come back. Oh, you knew you were around somebody who had it. And I was like, dude, I take care of an 88-year-old woman. I did not intentionally infect anybody. That whole feeling like a leper, like even if I walked to my side of the street to talk to the neighbors who were in their yard across the street, they were like, we don't want to talk. Like, it can't travel 50 fucking feet.
Right.
Which is
But,
so
you know,
funny because a lot of
I
times
got
those people are the ones like,
leprosy.
it's just the flu, but then you
Right.
get it and you're fucking
That
patient
cognitive
zero.
dissonance.
I don't like that part of it. And you know what? That's why when grandma came home, they told her, hey, you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days still. They didn't test her before she left. I know she's fine. I know I'm fine. My smell's back. My taste is back. It's just
abundance of caution, man. Yeah. That makes sense to be on the
but
same
having to
side.
tell somebody that, I mean, it's worse than getting called, you know, while you're in the military. Hey, somebody you had sex with tested positive for the clap, and we need you to come in. And then you got to go, who else have you had sex with? And you got to go,
Steve.
Jay.
You got to walk out and see two of them on the way out. You know what I mean? It's bad.
Gonna
It's
get
just
pretty
bad
drunk.
juju.
Do you guys want to talk for 1 second? Because he said he knows he's fine now because his sense of smell is back and all that. About shedding, how long you can shed the virus and everything. Just inform people out there that hopefully have opened their minds a little bit to what the timeline is on this shit. Sarah, do you know pretty well?
I mean, I know the viral shedding, they were finding it in semen and in stool, but
That's
I don't
where I
know.
found it.
What?
Right. The best
Now we know
bodily
how
functions.
That's where I got it.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Jokes up. Yeah, but I don't, you know, it could just be, you know, the virus shell. Like, I don't know that you could necessarily be infected by that, even though you're still shedding. You know, even if you get swabbed, you can sometimes just have dead viral.
But it's not active and it can't.
Yeah,
infect
right.
someone
So,
else.
but I will say that a lot of, like I said before, you know, I had patients that have been, you know, positive for, like I said, a month, and then end up feeling okay, and then coming in with like still shortness of breath or things like that, and then they end up on a ventilator, and you know, that's the end all of it, even though they've been negative for a long time, or like we talked about, throwing blood clots. And I don't know if you're on anything, but like if they put you on like aspirin or some kind of like antiplatelet aggregation kind of thing to help with that. But it really just depends. And, you know, some of these people were really young, like 39-year-old mothers that, you know, just ended up, like I said, just having shortness of breath for a long lasting time. Or people have like COVID brain fog where, you know, you're having trouble with memory, and
Like
it just depends.
The metaphor I like to use for this is like, if you have a house and it's on fire, right? The fire is the virus. It's burning the house. And then you put the fire out, the virus is gone, but your house is still all fucking burned up, right? It's still going to be like, you can go in there and the rafters can come down on you still. It can still like fall apart more.
Oh shit, this place
It's compromised.
It's a log cabin.
There you go. There you go.
See,
So that's what it is, right?
And everything, it's out. Forget it.
Yeah.
Shire is gone.
What about remdesivir and hydrochloroquine and all this shit? You want to talk about that and actual therapeutic vaccines that might work?
Well, Trump took hydrochloroquine for how long and still got it. So obviously that shit don't work.
Right. Yeah. I would not advise anyone to take that.
Yeah.
Especially the kind you put in fish tanks. People killed themselves.
So I mean, we've had clinical studies now that show that at best, remdesivir maybe shortens the amount of time you'll spend with symptoms in the hospital, makes your symptoms slightly better, but it's nothing dramatic. And again, I don't really know the side effects of remdesivir, so I don't know if, you know, on the the benefit, pros and cons of it, if it's worth taking. But so far, there's no great therapeutic. Potentially, this one, the Regeneron antibody cocktail, we'll see more data come out of that one. That one potentially could, be a benefit that's worth doing. At this point, there's no actual cure. Like, we've been able to cure hepatitis C.
You're alone, right?
Yeah. Is it cool if I start filming now?
No, what do we get inside?
Why are you here?
I just thought it was really interesting, that someone hasn't left their basement in 6 months, not even to use the bathroom. Is that true?
Why would I want to go out there? I got everything I need right here. That's what's wrong with most people. They're weak-willed pussies and parasites who buy into that whole "it takes a village" bullshit. You know how many aliases I've used calling into radio shows?
I've had it up to my goddamn gills with the systematic feminization of this country.
I don't think I'm supporting what you want, Chad. Get your own damn show if you think you got that much to say.
You live in your mom's basement.
Kid! No! Fuck you! What's so special about my loser son?
You really do hate your own mother.
She's a woman. Why wouldn't I?
There's some disconnect there, and if I can find it, what is hate? Where does it come from? Where does it go?
You want to know what gender you are? Reach down the front of your fucking pants and chew fucking kite. Black Lives Matter. Do you call horses slaves? Liberal fucktard. Enough with the parades and the rainbow flags.
Dude, this guy's... it's like pure hate, man.
I want to see something really fucking cool.
This guy is a fucking animal. He's got himself on a leash. He's itching to get off that fucking leash. And he's gonna fucking kill some people.
What a fucking show.
Stop!
What do we hear?
Look at me! Look at me!
We're gonna help you show them the light. We're gonna change the world.
This is Cactus Jack coming to you live from a studio audience.
To the man who calls himself Cactus Jack, we have watched as you have rocketed to infamy.
And you wonder why these cornered animals lash out. Pick a fucking side.
And now, we have watched as you have called for literal blood.
I know you're out there listening. It's buzzing in your ears, burrowing into your brain.
Do it.
Jack, you're gonna love this.
I pulled that trigger on that motherfucker's head.
Your VPN will not shield you. The darknet will not hide you. You and your kind are finished.
You think I'm scared of you?
Come and fucking get me!